You're scrolling, browsing, wondering, noticing, again, that there's something missing. Maybe it's the apartment you can't afford, the job title you haven't reached, or the feeling that someone else has more, is more. There's always someone richer, always something shinier. And in that comparison trap, wealth feels like a finish line you never cross. But to someone like Musonius Rufus, that panic you feel, it's misplaced, absurd, even. He'd remind you that emperors lived in gold and still feared death. He'd call out your hunger for more as the very thing making you poor. Not in your bank account, but in your soul. So, slow down, breathe, strip away the noise. Let's sit in the quiet with a man who taught that true wealth isn't what you reach for, it's what you stop needing. Now, you already have enough, but it doesn't feel that way, does it? There's always another notification, another reminder that you could be doing more, having more, spending more. The silence between achievements starts to sound like failure. And yet Musonius Rufus, the man Roman historians called the Roman Socrates, saw this hunger not as natural, but as learned madness. He believed that real wealth doesn't shout. It doesn't sparkle or post itself online. It exists quietly, inside a person who has aligned their desires with their needs, not because they've given up on ambition, but because they've learned what actually matters. You begin to notice it when you stop chasing, when the noise dims and you can hear your own thoughts again. The truly rich man, Musonius said, is not the one who has the most, but the one who needs the least. You glance around your life and ask, what if I already have everything required to be content? It's hard to believe. You've been told otherwise your whole life. But Musonius wasn't interested in the lies of commerce or the stories sold by status. He taught that to live according to nature, a central Stoic principle, was to live with clarity, to shed unnecessary wants, and to understand what is truly necessary. And what is necessary? Food, shelter, integrity, companionship, wisdom, a functioning body, and a calm mind. Everything beyond that, he argued, was optional. Yet most people trade away what is necessary to chase the optional. They sacrifice rest for luxury. They sell honesty for a raise. They trade joy for a performance of wealth that impresses no one worth impressing. Musonius pointed to Socrates, barefoot, humble, endlessly questioning, as an example of a man who lived richer than kings. Socrates owned almost nothing, but walked the streets of Athens with complete freedom. No one could bribe him. No one could control him through fear of losing property, because he had so little to lose. His wealth was internal, built on clarity, curiosity, and courage. Can you imagine what it would feel like to want nothing more than what you already have? Pause for a moment, count what you didn't buy, but can't live without: your breath, your memory, your capacity to reflect, all free, all yours. Musonius would say that if you can master your desires, you are richer than the man with overflowing vaults, because your peace can't be stolen. The modern world makes this idea feel impossible. We're surrounded by engineered dissatisfaction. Your phone pings to remind you what you don't have. Your feed is a hall of mirrors, each one reflecting a shinier life. You're not supposed to feel enough. You're supposed to feel almost enough, just one purchase away. But the Stoics didn't negotiate with that kind of madness. They cut it at the root. They didn't aim to manage desire. They aimed to shrink it until it fit inside reason. You try that, just for a day. You question every craving. Do I really need this? What would happen if I walked away? Would I be less whole? And then you realize something unnerving. Most of the things you chase aren't for survival. They're for show. And the more you collect, the more you must protect. Suddenly, your things own you. So you begin to practice a new kind of inventory. Instead of measuring net worth in dollars, you measure it in freedom, in self-respect, in the ability to go without and not feel empty. That's what Musonius taught. That's what the early Stoics lived. And that's your new edge. Not competing in the arena of excess, but stepping out of it entirely, laughing, gently, at the thought that your happiness could be held in a box, or transferred through a bank. Because once you see the illusion, you can't unsee it. And when you finally sit still and feel whole, you start to understand the richest man is the one who recognizes he has enough and refuses to trade that peace for anything less real. Luxury is a trap. You feel it when you scroll through images of glossy hotel rooms and open-concept kitchens. When you hear someone drop a brand name with just the right hint of casual detachment, it pricks something in you. A sense that you're falling behind, not in survival, but in status. That quiet panic. I should have more by now. But Musonius Rufus would look you in the eye and ask, "What has luxury made you?" He didn't despise wealth. He despised what wealth did to people, the way it softened the will, the way it made otherwise strong minds fragile. Comfort isn't evil, he taught, but it is dangerous when it becomes your goal. Because once you tether your peace to comfort, your courage begins to rot. You stop taking risks. You hesitate to speak the truth if it might cost you your seat at the table. You tiptoe through life trying not to lose what you've piled up, instead of moving boldly toward what truly matters. This is why Musonius and other Stoics like Cato the Younger practiced voluntary discomfort. They wore coarse clothing, slept on the floor, walked long distances when carriages were available. Not because they hated comfort, but because they refused to be controlled by it. Cato, a Roman senator, once wore a dark, shabby cloak into the Senate not to make a point, but to test himself. Could he face ridicule without flinching? Could he resist the invisible leash that comfort puts around your neck? You face the same question now, just wrapped in newer fabric. Could you give up hot showers for a week? Could you walk when you could drive? Could you eat plain food in silence and call it dinner? Not forever, just long enough to know that you can. Because here's the truth Musonius knew. Luxury is a prison with velvet bars. It seduces you into thinking you're free while slowly making you dependent. And when you can't live without comfort, you're not living. You're decorating your cage. Stoic philosophy teaches that you should own things without letting things own you. That means practicing the art of letting go, not in dramatic renunciation, but in small daily refusals. You skip the extra shot of espresso not because it's unhealthy, but because it's unnecessary. You take the stairs not to prove anything to the world, but to whisper to yourself, I am not ruled by ease. This is the discipline of desire, not repressing it, but refining it. Remember the Stoic principle from earlier, living according to nature. Nature doesn't demand silk sheets or imported wine. It asks for shelter, sustenance, and a spirit that can endure. Musonius saw clearly what luxury does to a society. It breeds anxiety, not peace. It feeds rivalry, not community. It trains people to expect pleasure, then to panic when it doesn't arrive on time. He warned that a life aimed at indulgence ends in fragility. And fragility, for a Stoic, is the ultimate poverty. You've felt this before. When a delayed flight sends someone into a rage. When lukewarm coffee ruins someone's morning. Small cracks in a soft life. But the Stoic sees those cracks as invitations to train. Every discomfort is a rehearsal for resilience. Every inconvenience, a test of strength. You don't have to move to the mountains or wear burlap to practice this. You start by not reaching for your phone the moment you're bored, by eating what's available, not what's ideal, by sitting with stillness instead of chasing entertainment. Each time, you reclaim a piece of yourself. Musonius once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more." Let that echo in the background the next time a luxury ad tries to sell you happiness. You're not being asked to reject all comfort, but you're being asked to notice when comfort starts to demand your obedience. That's the pivot. That's the point where you shift from user to used. And once you see it, you begin to reverse it. You get cold and smile. You skip a luxury and feel lighter. You remember Cato walking barefoot through Rome, and you take the long road home. Because every luxury you can walk away from becomes proof of strength, and every indulgence you resist becomes a stone in the foundation of your freedom. You hate Mondays. The alarm hits like a slap. The commute is a grind, meetings pile up, and by 3 p.m., your soul feels gray. You think, Surely there's more to life than this. But Musonius Rufus would challenge that thought, not by dismissing your exhaustion, but by redefining the very thing you're doing: work, labor, the effort of staying alive and useful. He saw it not as drudgery, but as dignity, not something to escape, but something to respect. To him, work was the foundation of philosophy. The Stoic principle at the heart of this view is the dichotomy of control. Some things are up to you, and some are not. You don't always control the results of your work, the promotion, the praise, the profit, but you do control how you work, with what attitude, with what values, with what discipline. Musonius didn't care what your job was. He cared whether you did it with character. That was the true test of wealth. Unlike many philosophers of his time, Musonius openly praised manual labor. He said that a good person should not consider physical work beneath them. In fact, he insisted that people who worked with their hands, farmers, craftsmen, tradespeople, often lived closer to wisdom than idle elites. You might imagine a philosopher lounging in robes all day, debating ideas in marble halls. But Musonius taught that if you couldn't dig, cook, build, or repair, your philosophy wasn't grounded in reality. He said, "We should not be ashamed to work with our hands. There is no occupation so lowly that it cannot be done with virtue." Think of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, rising before dawn to write meditations to himself, not as an escape from power, but as armor for it. He had armies to command, governors to judge, and endless requests to resolve. Yet he insisted that his real job was to be good, fair, awake, and strong in each task. So what about you? You sit at a screen, or stand behind a counter, or carry tools in a van. You put in hours and energy, and some days it feels invisible, thankless. But Musonius would say, it's not the job that makes you noble. It's your virtue within the job. Are you honest when no one's watching? Are you disciplined when it would be easy to coast? Do you bring order to chaos, even quietly? That's wealth. That's why Musonius taught that people should raise their children not to seek riches, but to be fit for life. And fitness, to a Stoic, means being able to do what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, with steadiness and purpose. You don't need a title for that, or a corner office, or a brand. You just need effort, repeated, with integrity. Too often, we mistake wealth for leisure, lying on a beach, doing nothing. But idleness, Musonius warned, makes the soul weak. The truly rich person works, not as a slave to income, but as a steward of their own strength. So next time you groan at a task, remember, your hands are shaping your soul. The way you treat each responsibility is a reflection of your inner state. Are you resentful, or are you resolute? Work reveals you, and when done well, it refines you. Musonius believed that no philosophy is complete without practice. He'd ask, of what use is it to discuss what virtue is, if you don't live it while sweeping a floor or chopping wood? That's the test. Not how well you talk, but how well you toil. And don't confuse suffering with value. Stoicism isn't about romanticizing burnout. It's about working with peace in your heart, even when the job is heavy. You take breaks when needed. You rest to restore, not to escape. Because in the end, real wealth isn't what work gets you. It's what work makes you. And slowly, you begin to see your labor differently, not as chains, but as chisels, carving out endurance, clarity, and pride. You show up not because someone is watching, but because you are, and you've decided to show up well. So you punch in, you pick up your tools, you answer that next email, not because it's glamorous, but because you've remembered even emperors had to work. And you now too are building an empire, not in the world, in yourself. You give, but often with calculation. You give time if you think it'll earn you credit. You give money when it feels safe. You give attention, maybe, but always while your mind drifts back to yourself. Most of us give like merchants, expecting return, tracking value, protecting the balance sheet of effort. But Musonius Rufus taught that real wealth flows in the opposite direction. To him, what you give freely is the clearest measure of your abundance. He believed that generosity, genuine, unselfish, unrecorded, wasn't charity. It was duty, not an add-on to the good life, but proof that you were already living it. Musonius argued that humans are meant to live as part of a whole. This comes from the Stoic principle of cosmopolitanism, the idea that every person, from slave to senator, is part of one universal city, one shared human family. And just as the hand feeds the mouth without negotiation, so should we serve one another without keeping score. Imagine how absurd our modern stinginess would look to someone like him. Hoarding wealth while your neighbors starve, competing over clothes while your spirit withers, counting what you've given like a miser guarding his coins. Musonius would say, this is not civilization, it's shared loneliness. And loneliness, in a Stoic sense, is a kind of spiritual poverty. Seneca, near the end of his life, gave away enormous sums of his fortune, money he could have used to flee political danger or retire into luxury. But he didn't. He believed the soul grows through outward action, not inward insulation. He wrote letters, many, many letters, sharing what he learned, warning others, guiding students, even as his own future crumbled. That wasn't weakness. That was wealth, the ability to give when life was taking. Musonius believed that everyone, rich or poor, has something to offer, a kind word, a skill, a lesson, a shoulder, a reminder. When you withhold these, you become smaller. When you offer them, you expand. And you don't need applause. That's the trap of modern giving, making sure it's seen. We measure generosity by visibility, not sincerity. Look how kind I am, we say, posting, tagging, showcasing. But Musonius taught that the truly virtuous person gives like the sun warms the earth, quietly, steadily, without ever asking for thanks. You feel it when you do something for someone who can't repay you, when you answer the call late at night, when you share what you know with someone younger, when you stop what you're doing just to be present. In those moments, you touch the very essence of what it means to live well. And yes, the world tells you to be careful, to protect your time, your energy, your resources, to avoid being used. But Musonius would ask, are you being used, or are you practicing the art of being useful? There's a difference. He taught that the rich person is not the one who owns the most, but the one who needs the least and shares the most. If you have enough to give, without fear, without resentment, you are already rich. Not someday. Now. And here's the secret. Giving doesn't empty you. It empties your ego. And in that clearing, something better grows. Connection, purpose, a soul that knows its own strength. Try it today. Give something small, a genuine compliment, an hour of undivided attention, a note of encouragement to someone who's forgotten their worth. Don't track it. Don't announce it. Just let it flow. Watch how you feel. Not better than, just better. Because Musonius believed that the measure of a life is not what you accumulate, but what you distribute. Not in volume, but in spirit. The person who gives without counting, without condescension, without agenda, that person is living in real abundance. You begin to understand. Giving isn't something you do when you have more. It's how you create more of what matters. And maybe, just maybe, that's been the real wealth all along. Wealth dies with the body. You know this, but you don't live like it. You chase savings, status, security, as if these things will follow you beyond the grave. You organize your life around future gains, but future bodies still return to dust. Musonius Rufus didn't speak of death as a threat, but as a teacher, a way to burn through illusion and ask, what will you be when the rest is stripped away? The Stoics spoke often of death, not morbidly, but precisely because it clarifies what is real, what matters, what's durable. They weren't afraid of the end. They feared never beginning to live wisely. Musonius reminded his students that fortune fades, bodies age, and titles dissolve, but virtue remains. You can't pack your investment portfolio into the afterlife. You can't inherit someone else's integrity. The only thing you carry into the silence is the kind of person you chose to become. And yet, we live as if we're preparing for an audit, not a reckoning. This is where Stoicism insists. Remember your death, not to dwell in dread, but to sharpen your values. Wealth, when held too tightly, becomes a mask. But Musonius didn't want masks. He wanted truth. Truth about what you're really made of when the applause stops, when the comforts fade, when the account balances drop to zero. He often quoted the idea that we are actors in a role. You don't get to choose the script, but you do choose how well you perform. If your role is to be rich, be generous. If it is to be poor, be proud. If it is to suffer, do so with courage. If it is to lead, do so with justice. When you die, the costume falls away. Only the performance remains. That's why he warned against worshiping wealth. Because when you live to acquire, you forget how to live to serve. You become frantic to keep instead of free to give. You clutch at time and possessions, status, and then lose them all anyway. You've seen this happen in obituaries that list careers but not character, in legacies built on fear, not kindness, in estates passed down to children who never knew their parents' true faces. Musonius wouldn't call that success. He'd call it forgetfulness. A man who remembers death lives urgently, but not anxiously. He simplifies. He slows. He speaks the truth. He does what must be done without delay. This is why he trained his students in endurance and simplicity. He wanted them ready, not to die, but to live fully, while it still mattered. And you, listening now, are no different. The Stoic question still stands. If everything you owned vanished tomorrow, who would remain? Pause. Think about it. Would you be proud of the habits you've practiced, the way you've spoken, the love you've given or withheld? Would you be able to say, even in loss, I lived well? Because wealth isn't immunity from death. It's a temporary distraction from your deepest fear, that without your things, you are nothing. But the Stoics saw through that. They saw that death makes everyone equal again. So they lived with that equality in mind. Now, not someday. They gave freely, spoke bravely, trained the body and the soul, and they died not perfect, but prepared. That's the final lesson Musonius Rufus offers. Don't count your wealth in coins. Count it in peace, in honesty, in the absence of regret. Let death not haunt you, but guide you. Not as a countdown, but as a compass. Because once you know where this road ends, you begin to walk it differently, lighter, freer, more focused on being, less on having. And one day, when the curtain falls and your role is done, you'll know you didn't just perform well, you lived well. So now you sit with a quiet truth. The richest life doesn't need riches. It needs courage, simplicity, the strength to resist illusion. You've walked with Musonius Rufus through desire, discipline, labor, generosity, and mortality. And through it all, you've seen the same shape of wisdom repeated. Let go. Let go of what is extra. Let go of what is shallow. Let go of what dies. Keep what endures. And in doing so, you don't shrink, you expand. Your life, once bloated with unnecessary striving, begins to breathe. You feel lighter, sharper, more whole. That's the Stoic vision of wealth. Not comfort without end, but character without compromise. So take that with you, into tomorrow's choices, into today's silence. And remember, real wealth is not what you hold. It's what you can afford to lose without fear. Until next time, be well, live simply, stay steady.